Hello, everybody. This is the Authority Podcast presented by Minority Authority, the brand. My name is Darnell. And for this week's podcast, what I wanted to do was I wanted to touch on Black names. I wanted to, that the idea behind this podcast is to really just talk about Black issues, to educate, to give you some information, hopefully provide a little bit of entertainment for you. And so with this one, I decided to write about Black names. Is something that's not really discussed. So I kind of just wanted to give my perspective on it. And one of the things that I find that I like to do in terms of my writing is to be able to combine it with some form of comedy and, give a little bit of history or a little bit of backstory on it. And so that's how I got to this podcast, or this episode at least. So comedian Rodney Dangerfield tells of a joke where he wants to get started in show business and happens on a newspaper ad promising to improve his personality. Rodney Dangerfield goes to see the guy. The guy assesses him and determines it's not his personality, but his name that's the problem. Dangerfield responds to the guy, "What's wrong with my name?" Adding, "Even Shakespeare said, 'What's in a name?'" The guy responds, "Look, kid, do you want to listen to me or do you want to listen to your friends?" So the irony behind that is that the guy who's selling names don't know who Shakespeare is. So if you consider yourself a shoe salesman, for instance, you probably should at least know the more famous brands. So that's a little side joke about that. But anyway, he convinces Dangerfield to buy the Dangerfield name and adds, "I only have one condition if you buy the name. While you're using the name, don't give it a bad name." That's my Italian accent. And so Rodney Dangerfield decides to buy the name and he takes the name home. When he gets home, he realizes that he might have made a mistake. He calls the guy and he calls the guy hoping to exchange the name, and realizes that whenever he calls the guy, he finds out that the guy who sold him the Dangerfield name changed his name. So Dangerfield is stuck with the Dangerfield name. In another instance, I read or heard of someone naming their son Whitney. The son later asked the father why he named him Whitney, and his father responded because he knew that it would make him tougher. And I was like, enough said. A boy named Whitney is going to get into some shit. He's going to get teased. So he's going to have to fight, which in turn is going to make him tougher. So where does the naming practices come from in the Black community? Is this okay? How does it impact the community? Different naming practices I've heard came about with the popularity of Black Power, with the Black Power movement, because it was about establishing Black identity. And what says more about a person than a person's name? In some countries, a person's last name follows them for generations and establishes their place in the economic system. That's like the caste system, royalty, peasantry, etc. So why is Black names so heavily scrutinized? My thoughts, there's this thing in America that we are big on, and that thing is called assimilation. More specifically, cultural assimilation. The process in which a minority group or an immigrant group basically comes to resemble a society's majority group by adopting their values, behaviors, and beliefs. American-born Blacks are generally not very patriotic. There's never been much of a love affair between the two of us, America and, us in America. And just as a quick homework assignment, next time you drive through a Black neighborhood, count the number of flags you see displayed in the yards or on the side of the houses or just hanging off of the houses. Blackness, and particularly outward Blackness, is in direct opposition to American assimilation. Not only is Blackness seen as nonconformist, but overt displays of Blackness is also seen as a threat to America and its white hierarchical power structure. Conformity in this case is about controlling and conserving power, even if that means critiquing what your name and your child's names are, and their life chances as a result. Writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, I believe, said it best. American patriotism and black pride cannot coexist because one teaches self-love and the other teaches self-hate. A study was conducted, the likelihood of a job callback based on the name, etc. And you can find this on Freakonomics. It's a documentary on Netflix. Or actually, I'm sorry, it's not on Netflix, it's on Prime. And basically, studies were conducted in Boston and in Chicago where 5,000 resumes were sent out with black-sounding names and white-sounding names with similar job experience. And the study concluded that those with black-sounding names got callbacks 33% less than the white names. Think for a minute about that. What about celebrity names and their children? Their names run the gambit, for instance. Celebrities name their children whatever they please because the celebrities themselves are likely well off, and their children, whether through inheritance or connections, will likely be well off too. Nobody gives a shit about what they name their kids. If they do, it's just a joke of some sort, but not much is thought about it. And also, as an adage, there are family names in America that, if mentioned, they would get preferential treatment. Sports and entertainment to some extent has opened the door for some black folks, but not on the level of, say, the Fords, the Astors, the Carnegies, the Kennedys, the Bushes, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Kochs, or the Kochs, not the Cox, I'm sorry, Cox. Some of these names even if you don't know exactly what they're famous for. Something that most of us understand but never really speak about is that names are very much an extension of who we are. LeBron, Fantasia, Kobe, Muhammad, Lassane, Tupac are certainly not names that are acceptable in mainstream America to be put on an application, but you never forget it if you met one of them. How do our naming practices affect the community? Well, in my opinion, it gives the community its own uniqueness. It's a big fuck you to the system eager to control our actions, but are unwilling to include us in the family portrait. So what's in a name? It doesn't matter. It's just important that while you're using a name, you don't give it a bad name. Surely there will be a long time before you'll run across another LeBron, Prince, Venus, Serena, Cornell, Marcus Garvey, Muhammad Ali, all of which are uniquely special for both their achievements, intellectual qualities, and or business acumen, none of which can legitimately be critiqued for what their parents named them. So that's my podcast on what's in the name. I hope it gave you some kind of perspective or something to think about, because I know a lot of times in our communities, we critique our own names. And a lot of times we say, why did she name that baby that? Or why did they do that? That kid is going to have a hard time getting a job and all of this shit. And we do that a lot. But it's not about our acceptance in the broader culture, because we shouldn't have to need to accept whether or not they're going to accept us. We should be perfectly fine with, this is America first off, so we should be perfectly fine with doing whatever we want to, as long as we're not breaking a law that's harming anybody else. So that's my podcast. You can like and subscribe. For these podcasts, I'm going to have to slow down a little bit. I have a few things going on, so I'll probably have to cut down to once a month. It's hard for me a lot of these episodes I've already written up, and it's harder for me to, with other stuff that I got going on, it's harder for me to memorize what I've even wrote down. So, I basically have to slow down a little bit and try to take more time, basically writing out and conceptualizing my podcast. I'm about 4 months in, so, I'm not an expert by a far shot. And if you've been watching these, you probably know that. But that doesn't mean that stop you from doing something that you like to do, which is educate, or, just give the community a different perspective and let them know that, who they are is not to be judged by somebody who's not one of them. So my goal is always to educate, entertain to some extent, and just be able to put some positive vibes in the community. So that's my time. Thank you for watching, and y'all have a good day or a good night.